I gave my daughter a farm to rebuild her life, but when I arrived, she was crying. Her in-laws had taken over, forced her to serve them, and mocked her in her own kitchen. My name is Jackson Reed. I am 68 years old, and for the first time in my life, I wanted to burn down a building I had paid for. I stood in the shadows of the oak trees, watching my only daughter on her knees scrubbing a floor I knew was already clean. The woman standing over her holding a glass of wine that cost more than a mortgage payment was laughing. My daughter Sarah was not laughing. She was weeping silently, her tears hitting the soapy water. I gripped the rough bark of the tree until my knuckles turned white. They thought Sarah was alone. They thought she was defenseless. They thought her father was just some washed-up old man rotting away in Texas. They were wrong. They had no idea that the deed to the land they were standing on was in my safe deposit box. They had no idea that I wasn't just a father. I was the landlord. And eviction day was coming a lot sooner than they expected. Before I tell you how I dismantled their lives piece by piece, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I drove my Ford F-150 2,000 miles from Texas to Virginia. My back ached. My knees popped every time I stepped out for gas. But the pain did not matter. I had a mission. 6 months ago, I bought a 50-acre farm in the Shenandoah Valley. I bought it through a blind trust. I wanted Sarah to have a fresh start. She had lost her job as a graphic designer. Her husband Brian had made some bad investments. They were drowning in the city. I told her I knew a guy who needed a caretaker for a property. It was a white lie. A necessary lie. I wanted her to feel independent, not like a charity case. I paid the taxes. I paid the insurance. All she had to do was live there and find her peace. I did not tell her I was coming. I wanted to surprise her. I wanted to see the color back in her cheeks. I wanted to see her hands covered in garden soil, not city grime. I pulled off the highway onto the gravel road that led to the property. The GPS said I was 5 minutes away. My heart was beating fast. I checked the cooler in the passenger seat. I had brought some Texas brisket she loved. I had a bottle of good bourbon for Brian. I was ready to be the good father-in-law. Then I saw the gate. I stopped the truck. The dust settled around the tires. I stared through the windshield. When I bought the place, the entrance was a simple wooden gate with a sign that said Willow Creek. It was rustic. It was humble. It was Sarah. Now there was a massive iron gate. It looked like something that belonged on a fortress, not a farm. It was black and gold and ugly. But the gate was not the problem. The problem was the sign. Fixed to the stone pillar was a brass plaque. It read, "The Kensington Estate." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Kensington. That was Brian's last name. That was the name of his parents, Patricia and Gerald. Why was their name on the gate? This wasn't their land. This wasn't their house. I turned off the engine. I stepped out of the truck. The air smelled of pine and rain. It should have been peaceful. It felt like a warning. I walked up to the keypad. I punched in the code I had set up with the security company. 1994. Sarah's birth year. Access denied. The red light blinked at me. I tried again. 1994. Access denied. They had changed the code. They had changed the name. My hands were shaking, but not from age. They were shaking from rage. I walked back to the truck. I could have called Sarah. I could have honked the horn until someone came down. But 40 years in the construction business taught me something important. When the job site looks wrong, you do not announce yourself. You inspect. I drove the truck into a thicket of trees off the main road. I covered the hood with a tarp. I grabbed my cane. I did not really need it to walk, but it made a good weapon if things went south. I hiked up the ridge that overlooked the farmhouse. It took me 20 minutes. My breathing was heavy, but my mind was sharp. I reached the edge of the property line. The old wooden fence was still there on the perimeter. I climbed over it. I moved quietly through the apple orchard. The farmhouse came into view. It was a beautiful structure. 2 stories, wraparound porch, white siding. I had spent $50,000 renovating it before Sarah moved in. I wanted it to be perfect. I saw cars in the driveway. A lot of cars. I recognized Brian's modest sedan. It was parked off to the side near the barn, almost hidden in the tall grass. But in the main circular driveway, there were 2 vehicles that did not belong. A silver Mercedes SUV and a bright red convertible sports car. They were parked aggressively, taking up the entire space. I crept closer. I stuck to the shadows of the oak trees. The sun was setting. The lights inside the house were on. The curtains were open. It was like watching a movie on a big screen. I saw the living room first. It was full of furniture I did not buy. Gaudy velvet sofas, gold lamps. It looked like a museum, not a home. And there on the sofa sat 2 women. One was Patricia. I recognized her from the wedding photos. She was in her late 50s but tried hard to look 30. She had blonde hair that was sprayed into a helmet. She was wearing a silk robe that looked expensive. The other woman was younger, maybe 25. Courtney, Brian's sister. I remembered her too. She had spent the entire wedding reception complaining about the champagne. She was lounging on the armchair, scrolling through her phone. They were laughing. They were clinking glasses. I squinted. The bottle on the table. It was dark glass with a distinctive gold label. Chateau Margaux. My blood ran cold. That was not just wine. That was a bottle I had sent to Sarah for her birthday last week. It was worth $800. I sent it with a note that said, "Save this for a victory." Patricia and Courtney were drinking it like it was grape juice. Where was Sarah? I moved along the side of the house. I ducked under the kitchen window. I slowly raised my head to peek inside. The kitchen was bright. The marble island I had installed was covered in dirty dishes, piles of plates, half-eaten food, empty bottles. It looked like a banquet had just ended. And there she was. Sarah was on the floor. She was wearing old gray sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun. She looked thin. Her cheekbones were too sharp. She had a bucket of soapy water next to her. She was scrubbing the tile floor with a brush. My heart broke. This was the girl who graduated with honors. This was the girl who designed websites for nonprofits. This was my little girl. And she was on her hands and knees. The door from the living room swung open. Patricia walked into the kitchen. She held her wine glass loosely. She swayed a little. She was drunk. I pressed my ear against the glass. The window was old single pane. Sound traveled through it easily. "You missed a spot, Sarah," Patricia said. Her voice was slurred, but the venom was clear. Sarah stopped scrubbing. She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. "I already did that spot, Patricia. It is clean." "It is clean when I say it is clean," Patricia snapped. She took a sip of wine. Then she looked at the floor. She looked at Sarah. And with a smile that I will never forget, she tipped her glass. Red wine splashed onto the white tiles. It splattered onto Sarah's arm. "Oops," Patricia said. She did not sound sorry. "Look at that. Now it is dirty again. Better clean it up before it stains. This is Italian tile. It is very expensive. Not that you would know about expensive things." Sarah did not scream. She did not throw the brush. She just lowered her head. Her shoulders shook. She dipped the rag into the bucket and started scrubbing the wine. I bit my lip so hard I tasted iron. I wanted to smash the window. I wanted to climb in there and strangle that woman. But I stopped myself. Where was Brian? Where was her husband? The back door opened. Brian walked in. He was wearing work boots covered in mud. He looked exhausted. He saw his mother. He saw his wife on the floor scrubbing wine. "Brian," Sarah said. Her voice was weak. "Please, help me." Brian looked at his mother. Patricia glared at him. Her eyes dared him to speak. "Don't you look at me like that, Brian," Patricia said. "Your wife is clumsy. She needs to learn how to take care of a proper estate. If we are going to live here, she needs to pull her weight." Brian looked at Sarah. He looked at the floor. "Just clean it up, Sarah," Brian muttered. "Mom is tired. Don't make a scene." He walked past her. He opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and walked out of the room. He left her there. I slid down the wall. I sat on the cold dirt. My hands were fists. My fingernails dug into my palms. They were living here. All of them. Patricia, Gerald, Courtney. They had moved in. They were treating my daughter like a servant in her own house, and Brian was letting them do it. Why? Why was Sarah taking this? She was strong. I raised her to be strong. There was something I was missing. Something held her captive here. I looked back at the window. Sarah was rinsing the rag. Her face was pale. She looked terrified. Not just unhappy. Terrified. I took a deep breath. The anger in my chest was a physical weight. It was heavy and hot. But anger without a plan is just noise. I did not build a construction empire by losing my temper. I built it by analyzing the foundation, finding the cracks, and bringing the whole thing down when the time was right. If I walked in there now, I would be the angry father. They would kick me out. They would call the police. They would manipulate Sarah against me. They would say I was crazy. No. I needed to know the whole story. I needed to know why the gate code was changed. I needed to know why the name on the sign was Kensington. I needed to know where the money I sent her was going. I stood up. I brushed the dirt off my jeans. I adjusted my cap. I was wearing my old work clothes, flannel shirt, faded denim, work boots that had seen better days. I hadn't shaved in 2 days. To anyone looking, I was just an old man, a nobody. Good. I would play that role. I would be the broke, desperate father. I would let them think I was powerless. I would let them think I was just another mouth to feed. I would let them show me exactly who they were. And when they had revealed every ugly inch of their souls, I would destroy them. I walked back to my truck. I pulled the tarp off. I drove it out of the woods and onto the main gravel road. I drove up to the gate. I pressed the intercom button. A voice crackled through the speaker. It was Courtney. "What do you want?" "We are not buying anything." "It is Jack," I said. My voice was raspy. "Sarah's father." There was silence. Then a scoff. "Wait there." 5 minutes later, the gate buzzed open. I drove up the long driveway. I parked behind the red convertible. I stepped out. The front door opened. Patricia stood there. She still had her wine glass. She looked at my truck. She looked at my boots. She wrinkled her nose like she smelled something rotten. Sarah ran out from behind her. "Dad!" she screamed. She ran down the steps. She threw her arms around me. She was shaking. She smelled like bleach and cheap soap. I hugged her tight. I felt her ribs. She was too thin. "Oh, Dad," she whispered into my chest. "You shouldn't have come. Not now." "Why, Sarah?" I asked quietly. "Because they will hurt you too," she sobbed. Before I could answer, Patricia cleared her throat. "Well," Patricia said. She did not come down the steps. She looked down at us from the porch. Look what the cat dragged in. We weren't expecting company, especially not company that looks like that. She gestured at my truck. I hope you didn't plan on staying, Jackson. We are very full. This is a private estate. I looked at her. I looked at the sign on the gate. I looked at my daughter trembling in my arms. Actually, Patricia, I said. I lowered my head. I made my shoulders slump. I tried to look defeated. I have nowhere else to go. I lost the business. I lost the house in Texas. I am broke. I came to see if family could help family. Sarah pulled back. She looked at me with wide eyes. Dad. What? Patricia laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Broke. She repeated. She looked at Courtney, who had just walked out eating an apple. Did you hear that, Courtney? The old man is a beggar. Just what we needed, Courtney said. She took a bite of the apple and chewed with her mouth open. Another parasite. Patricia took a sip of wine. Well, Jackson, we don't run a charity here, but since you are Sarah's father, I suppose we can't leave you on the street. It wouldn't look good for us in the community. She pointed a manicured finger toward the back of the property. There is a shed behind the stables. It has a cot. It is where we keep the fertilizer. You can sleep there. But do not think you are going to eat our food for free. If you stay, you work. She smiled. A cruel, twisted smile. We fired the gardener yesterday. You look like you know how to shovel manure. I looked at Sarah. She was about to protest. I squeezed her hand. I gave her a tiny wink. It was so fast only she saw it. She stopped. She understood. I was up to something. Thank you, Patricia, I said. My voice was humble. Thank you for your generosity. I will earn my keep. Good, Patricia said. Start by moving that truck. It is leaking oil on my driveway. She turned and walked back into the house. Courtney followed her, laughing. I looked at Sarah. Show me the shed, honey, I said. She led me around the back. The sun was gone. The air was cold. The shed was a wooden shack with gaps in the walls. It smelled of horse dung and gasoline. Dad, Sarah whispered as soon as we were alone. Why did you lie? You aren't broke. I put my hands on her shoulders. Listen to me, Sarah, I said. I need you to trust me. Why are they here? Why is their name on the gate? She started to cry again. They lost their house, Dad. Gerald gambled it away. They showed up 3 months ago. They said it was just for a few weeks. Then they started taking over. Brian owes them money too. Or he thinks he does. They guilt him every day. They say he ruined their lives, so he owes them this house. And the name. Patricia changed it last week. She said Willow Creek sounded poor. She wants to sell it, Dad. She wants to sell the farm to a developer. She says she has power of attorney because she claims I am mentally unstable. My blood boiled. Mentally unstable. That was the oldest trick in the book. She has doctor's notes, Dad, Sarah said. She knows a doctor in town. They are building a file on me. If I fight back, they threaten to have me committed. Brian believes them. He thinks I am depressed. He thinks they are helping. I pulled her into a hug. Okay, I said. Okay. Now I knew the game. They weren't just leeches. They were thieves. And they were using my daughter as the scapegoat. Go inside, Sarah, I said. Do exactly what they say. Don't fight back. Not yet. What are you going to do? She asked. I am going to become the best gardener they ever had, I said. And while I am pulling weeds, I am going to dig up every skeleton they have in their closet. She kissed my cheek and ran back to the house. I walked into the shed. There was a rusty cot in the corner, a pile of burlap sacks. I sat down. It was freezing. I took out my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "O'Malley," I said when he answered. "Jack." The voice on the other end was smooth and sharp. "I thought you retired." "I did," I said. "But I have a new project. I need you to run a background check. 4 names: Patricia Kensington, Gerald Kensington, Courtney Kensington, and Brian Reed." "What are we looking for?" O'Malley asked. "Everything," I said. "Debts, judgments, criminal records. I want to know what they eat for breakfast and who they owe money to. I want to know why they lost their house." "Consider it done," O'Malley said. "Are you in trouble, Jack?" "No," I said, looking at the lights of the big house where my daughter was probably serving them dinner right now. "I am not in trouble. I am the trouble." I hung up. I lay down on the cot. It was hard and cold, but I didn't mind. The discomfort kept me focused. They wanted a servant. They were going to get one. And he was going to serve them a dish they would choke on. Tomorrow, the work begins. Tomorrow, the Kensington estate begins to fall. I walked back up the gravel driveway toward the main house. The sun had completely dipped below the horizon, and the porch lights were blazing. They were golden and welcoming, but I knew the warmth inside was not for me. I needed to use the bathroom, and I wanted to see the man who had gambled away his own home and then stolen my daughter's sanctuary. I wanted to look Gerald Kensington in the eye. I wiped my boots on the grass, but I knew it would not make a difference to them. I knocked on the heavy oak door. It swung open almost immediately, but it was not Sarah who answered. It was a man I had only seen in wedding photos. Gerald Kensington stood there blocking the entrance like a bouncer at a club. He was a large man, but soft. His stomach pushed against the fabric of his expensive cashmere sweater. He held a cigar in one hand, and the smoke curled around his face. He looked me up and down. His eyes lingered on my stained work pants and my flannel shirt. He curled his lip in genuine disgust. "Can I help you?" Gerald asked. His voice was loud and booming, the kind of voice that loved to hear itself speak. "Deliveries go to the side door. We do not buy from door-to-door salesmen." "I am not selling anything," I said. I kept my voice low and steady. "I am Jack, Sarah's father." Gerald blinked. He took a drag from his cigar and blew the smoke directly past my shoulder. "Jack." He repeated the name as if it were a bad taste in his mouth. "Ah, yes. The construction worker. Patricia told me you had arrived. She said you were parking your truck. It took you long enough. I assume it broke down on the way up the driveway." He chuckled at his own joke. "I need to come in, Gerald," I said. "Just to wash up." He did not move. He planted his feet firmly. "Wash up?" he asked. "In my guest bathroom." "I don't think so. We just had the carpets cleaned. You look like you have been rolling in the mud." Sarah appeared in the hallway behind him. She looked small and frightened. "Dad," she said softly. "Let him in, Gerald. Please." He drove a long way. Gerald turned to her. His face turned red. "Do not tell me what to do in my house, Sarah," he snapped. "He is your father. You should have told him to dress appropriately before coming to a respectable estate." Patricia walked into the hallway. She was still holding her wineglass. She looked at the standoff and sighed dramatically. "Oh, let him in, Gerald," she said. "Just make him take those boots off outside. We need to have a family meeting anyway. We need to discuss his situation." Gerald grunted and stepped aside. I unlaced my boots and left them on the porch. I walked into the foyer in my socks. The floor was marble. It was cold. The house smelled of expensive perfume and stale cigar smoke. It was the smell of money trying too hard. They led me into the living room, but they did not offer me a seat on the velvet sofas. They stood by the fireplace and left me standing on the edge of the rug. It felt like a trial. "So," Gerald said. He sat down in a leather armchair and crossed his legs. "Patricia tells me you have had a run of bad luck." I nodded. I kept my eyes on the floor. I had to sell the defeat. The market turned. I lied. I overextended on a project in Houston. The bank called in the loans. They took the equipment. They took the house. I have nothing left but the truck and the clothes on my back. Gerald shook his head. He looked at Patricia and smirked. "Classic," he said. "No financial literacy. This is what happens when people try to play above their league. They build a little business and think they are tycoons. Then the real world hits them and they crumble." He pointed his cigar at me. "You know, Jackson, I used to work in finance, high-level investments. I managed millions. It takes a certain kind of mind to hold on to wealth. Clearly you do not have it." I bit the inside of my cheek. This man had lost his own house to gambling debts. He was living in my property because he was homeless. And he was lecturing me on finance. It took every ounce of my self-control not to laugh in his face. "You are right, Gerald," I said humbly. "I made mistakes. Big mistakes," Patricia added. "And now you come here looking for a handout." "I am not looking for money," I said. "Just a place to stay for a while, until I get back on my feet." Gerald laughed. It was a dry, cruel sound. "Get back on your feet," he said. "You are nearly 70 years old. Men like you do not get back on their feet. You just slowly slide into the grave." He stood up and walked over to me. He stood too close. He smelled of brandy. "Listen to me, Jackson," he said. "We are generous people. We are letting Sarah live here even though she contributes nothing financially. We are letting her husband Brian live here out of the goodness of our hearts. And now you want to join the caravan." He poked me in the chest with a fat finger. "We will allow it. But only because it would look bad to the neighbors if we kicked an old man to the curb. But let us be clear about the rules." "Rules?" I asked. "Rule number 1, Gerald said, counting on his fingers. "You do not come into the main house unless invited. You smell like labor, and we do not want that smell on our furniture." "Rule number 2, Patricia chimed in. "You eat what we give you. Sarah will bring you leftovers after we have finished dinner. We are not cooking special meals for a charity case." "Rule number 3, Gerald said. "And this is the most important one. You earn your keep. This estate requires maintenance. The gardens, the stables, the fences. If I see you sitting around doing nothing, you are gone. Do you understand?" I looked at Sarah. She was crying silently in the corner. She looked like she wanted to scream, but fear held her throat shut. I looked back at Gerald. "I understand," I said. "I am a hard worker. I will do whatever you need." "Good," Gerald said. He dismissed me with a wave of his hand. "Now get out. You are ruining the ambiance." I turned and walked out. I grabbed my boots from the porch. I heard them laughing as the heavy door slammed shut behind me. "I cannot believe he showed up like that," I heard Courtney say from inside. "What a loser." I walked through the darkness back to the shed. The temperature had dropped. The wind was cutting through my flannel shirt. The shed was pitch black inside. I fumbled for the light switch, but there was no electricity. Of course. I used the flashlight on my phone. The shed was filled with rusty tools and bags of fertilizer. There were cobwebs in the corners. The cot was essentially a metal frame with a thin, dirty mattress. I sat down on the edge of the cot. It creaked loudly. It was colder in here than outside. The wind whistled through the gaps in the wooden planks. I wrapped my arms around myself. I was a man who owned a construction company worth millions. I had a heated house in Texas with a stocked fridge and a soft bed. And here I was sleeping in a shed that wasn't fit for a dog. I saw something in the corner. A small cardboard box tucked behind a lawnmower. I walked over and opened it. Inside were old photos. Photos of Sarah when she was a baby. Photos of her graduation. Photos of me and her mother before she passed. Sarah had hidden them here. She had hidden her memories in the shed because she was not allowed to have them in the house. I picked up a photo of Sarah smiling on her graduation day. She looked so full of hope. I felt a tear run down my cold cheek. They had taken her light. They had crushed her spirit. They treated her father like a stray animal. I put the photo back in the box. I lay down on the cot. I pulled my jacket tight around me. I stared up at the dark ceiling. "Sleep well, Gerald," I whispered into the cold air. "Sleep well, Patricia. Enjoy the wine. Enjoy the warmth. Enjoy the feeling of power. Because tonight is the last night you will sleep peacefully. You wanted a gardener. You got one. I am going to prune this family tree until there is nothing left but the rot, and then I am going to burn it all down." I closed my eyes. The cold seeped into my bones, but the fire in my chest kept me warm. I started to formulate the plan. Step 1 was surveillance. Step 2 was asset tracing. Step 3 was the trap. I would be the best unwanted guest they ever had. By the time they realized who I really was, they would be begging for mercy, and I would have none to give. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the door to the shed did not open. It exploded inward. The metal latch screamed as a heavy boot kicked it open. I was awake instantly. You do not survive 40 years in construction without learning to sleep with one eye open. But my body was stiff. The cold from the concrete floor had seeped through the thin mattress and settled deep in my joints. I sat up. The beam of a high-powered flashlight blinded me. "Rise and shine, Jackson." Gerald's voice boomed. It was too loud for the morning. It was the voice of a man who enjoyed waking people up because it made him feel like a general. "We do not burn daylight on this estate." I shielded my eyes. Gerald was standing there in a pristine white tracksuit that looked like it had never seen a drop of sweat. He held a travel mug of steaming coffee. The smell of roasted beans drifted into the shed, mixing with the scent of gasoline and old fertilizer. My stomach growled. "Get dressed," Gerald commanded. He took a sip of his coffee. "The horses need mucking out. The south fence is leaning, and the driveway needs to be raked. I want the gravel perfect. No footprints." I stood up slowly. My knees popped. I reached for my boots. "I need coffee, Gerald," I said. My voice was thick with sleep. Gerald laughed. "Coffee is for management, Jackson. Labor drinks from the hose. Get to work. If you finish by noon, maybe Sarah will bring you a sandwich." He turned and walked away. The white tracksuit disappeared into the morning mist. I put on my boots. I laced them up tight. I felt the anger rising in my chest again, hot and familiar, but I pushed it down. I needed to see the extent of the damage. I needed to see exactly how they were running my farm into the ground. I walked to the stables. I had built these stables myself. I had imported the timber from Oregon. I had designed the ventilation system so the horses would never be too hot or too cold. Now the air was thick with the smell of ammonia. The stalls had not been cleaned in days. The horses looked nervous. Their water buckets were empty. My hands shook as I grabbed a shovel. This was not just laziness. This was neglect. These animals depended on us, and the Kensingtons were letting them rot. I started digging. The work was heavy. Wet straw and manure are heavier than concrete when you move it by the shovel load. My back screamed. My shoulders burned. But I found a rhythm. I let the physical pain distract me from the emotional agony of seeing my daughter's life dismantled. I worked for 4 hours straight. I cleaned every stall. I filled every water bucket. I groomed the horses until their coats shone. I did it not for Gerald, but for the animals, and for Sarah, because this was her dream, and I would be damned if I let them turn it into a nightmare. Around 9 o'clock, I moved to the south fence. Gerald was right. It was leaning, but he was wrong about why. It wasn't age. Someone had backed a vehicle into the post and tried to cover it up with mud. I recognized the tire tracks. They were wide and aggressive. The Mercedes SUV. Patricia. She had hit the fence, and instead of fixing it, she blamed the property. I found a sledgehammer and some nails in the shed. I stripped off my flannel shirt. The sun was up now, and I was sweating. I started pounding the post back into place. Every swing of the hammer was a release. One swing for Gerald. One swing for Patricia. One swing for the way Brian looked at the floor when his wife was being humiliated. Dad. The voice was a whisper. I stopped mid-swing. I turned around. Sarah was standing behind a large oak tree. She was holding a napkin-wrapped bundle. She looked over her shoulder toward the main house, terrified of being seen. "Sarah," I said. I dropped the hammer. "You shouldn't be here." She ran to me. She shoved the bundle into my hands. It was warm. 2 slices of toast with butter and a hard-boiled egg. It wasn't much, but to me it was a feast. "Eat quickly," she whispered. "They are still asleep." Gerald went back to bed after he woke you up. Patricia won't get up until noon. I ate the toast in 2 bites. I needed the fuel. "Sarah," I said, wiping the crumbs from my mouth. "We need to talk. Why are you letting them do this? You are smart. You are capable. Why are you serving them?" Tears welled up in her eyes immediately. It was like she was a dam holding back an ocean, and I had just poked a hole in it. "It is complicated, Dad," she said. "It is not complicated," I said. "It is slavery. It is debt, Dad," she hissed. Brian owes them everything. When his business failed, Gerald bailed him out. Or that is what he said. He said he took money from his retirement to save Brian from prison. "Prison?" I asked. "Brian signed some checks he shouldn't have," Sarah said, looking at the ground. "He was desperate. Gerald fixed it. But now Gerald says we owe him our lives. He says if we kick them out, he will turn Brian in for fraud. He has the copies of the checks. He holds it over our heads every single day." I felt a cold clarity wash over me. So that was the leverage. Blackmail. Gerald hadn't saved Brian out of love. He had saved him to own him. He had bought himself a slave for the price of a few bad checks. "And the doctors?" I asked. "The mental instability." Sarah hugged herself. Her arms were thin. "I cry, Dad. I cry a lot. I have panic attacks. Whenever I try to stand up for myself, Patricia records me. She edits the videos. She shows them to Brian. She says, 'Look how hysterical she is. Look how unstable she is. She brings in this doctor, Dr. Aris. He prescribes me pills, sedatives. I don't take them, but they think I do. They are building a case, Dad. They tell everyone I am having a breakdown. They say they are here to care for me.'" She looked up at me. Her eyes were red. "I am not crazy, Dad. But sometimes living here with them, I feel like I am losing my mind. They move things. They hide my keys. They change the passwords on my computer and tell me I forgot them. They are gaslighting me, Dad. And it is working." I grabbed her shoulders. My grip was hard. I needed her to feel my strength. Listen to me, Sarah. You are not crazy. You are being hunted. There is a difference. I looked toward the house. It stood there white and pristine, hiding the rot inside. Go back inside, I said. Keep pretending. Don't take the pills. Don't sign anything else. What are you going to do? She asked. I am going to fix the fence, I said loud enough for anyone listening to hear. Then I lowered my voice. And then I am going to make a call. She ran back to the house. I waited until she was inside. Then I pulled out my phone. I dialed O'Malley. Jack. O'Malley answered on the first ring. I need a deep dive on Gerald Kensington, I said. Not just debts. I want to know about a cover-up involving fraud and bad checks. I want to know if he actually paid off Brian's debt, or if he just bought the evidence to use as a leash. And check a doctor. Dr. Harris. I want to know if he has a license and how many malpractice suits he has buried. I am on it, O'Malley said. Jack, I found something else. Patricia. She has 3 maxed-out credit cards. But the interesting part is, who pays the minimums? Who? I asked. Sarah, O'Malley said. They gained access to her savings account 2 months ago. They are draining her dry, Jack. They are using her money to buy the wine she serves them. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I couldn't speak. The rage was choking me. They weren't just living here. They were cannibals. They were eating my daughter alive. I went back to work. I raked the driveway. I made the gravel perfect. I wanted everything to look beautiful for their downfall. At 5 o'clock, the cars started arriving. Not the police, not the bank. Guests. Courtney came out of the house. She was wearing a short silver dress that sparkled in the sunlight. She had a speaker in her hand blasting pop music. She looked at me raking the gravel and laughed. Hey, Gardner, she shouted. Her voice was shrill. My friends are coming over. We are having a party by the pool. We need someone to serve drinks. I stopped raking. I leaned on the handle. I am not a waiter, I said. I am here to fix the property. You are here because we let you be here, Courtney snapped. Her face twisted into an ugly sneer. Daddy said you have to earn your keep. Well, the pool boy quit. So congratulations. You got a promotion. Put on a clean shirt. You smell like a barn. 10 minutes later, I was standing by the pool. I was wearing a white button-down shirt that belonged to Brian. It was too tight in the shoulders. I held a tray of cocktails. The pool area was crowded with 20-somethings. Rich kids. Trust fund babies. They were drinking my liquor. They were swimming in my pool. Courtney was the queen bee. She sat on a float in the middle of the water-holding court. She pointed at me. Hey, everyone, she announced. The music dipped for a second. See that old guy? That is Sarah's dad. He lost all his money because he is an idiot. Now he works for us. Isn't that hilarious? The crowd laughed. It was a cruel, mindless sound. Hey, old man, a boy with frosted tips shouted. Beer. Now! I walked over. I handed him a beer. I kept my face blank. I was memorizing them. Every face, every laugh, every insult. The boy took the beer. Then he reached into his pocket. He pulled out a crumpled dollar bill. He threw it at me. It hit my chest and fluttered to the ground. Keep the change, Pops. Buy yourself a retirement plan. The laughter got louder. Courtney was cackling. Dance monkey. Someone yelled. I bent down. My knees ached. I picked up the dollar bill. It was dirty. I smoothed it out. I folded it neatly and put it in my pocket. Thank you, sir, I said. My voice was calm. I looked at the boy. I looked at Courtney. I looked at the group of parasites feeding on my daughter's misery. I was not humiliated. Humiliation requires you to value the opinion of the person insulting you. I did not value them. I cataloged them. I memorized the license plate of the boy's BMW. I memorized the faces of the girls drinking vodka tonics. I memorized the way Courtney treated the people she thought were beneath her. "Enjoy the party," I said softly. I walked away toward the house to refill the tray. As I passed the library window, I stopped. The blinds were open just a crack. Gerald was inside. He was on the phone. He was pacing. He looked agitated. He was sweating. "No, no, no," I heard him say. His voice was muffled through the glass. "The deal is solid. I just need a few more days. The girl is pliable. I will get the signature. Yes, 50 acres. Prime development land. The golf course will be magnificent. Just hold off the sharks. I will get you the money." I froze. The golf course. He wasn't just living here. He was selling it. He was selling my farm, my land, Sarah's sanctuary. He was negotiating with developers to turn Willow Creek into a country club. And he said he needed the signature. Sarah's signature. That was the endgame. The power of attorney wasn't enough for a land sale. They needed her to sign the deed over. Or they needed to prove she was incompetent so they could sign for her. I stepped back into the shadows. The dollar bill burned in my pocket. The party by the pool was just noise. The real threat was in the library. Gerald was cornered. He owed money to sharks. And a cornered animal is dangerous. He would not wait months. He would not wait weeks. He needed that signature now. I looked at the tray in my hand. I dropped it. The glass shattered on the patio stones. The time for gardening was over. I needed to get to Sarah. I needed to get her out of the line of fire. Because Gerald wasn't just going to ask for that signature. He was going to force it. I walked toward the kitchen door. My hands were fists again, but this time I wasn't hiding them. I was ready to use them. I moved from the patio to the side of the house. I had a bucket of soapy water and a squeegee. My job was to clean the windows. It was the perfect cover. Nobody looks at the help. Nobody thinks the old man wiping bird droppings off the glass is actually a shark circling the water. I positioned the ladder right under the library window. It was open a crack to let in the evening breeze. Gerald was inside. He was not alone. He was pacing back and forth, his heavy footsteps vibrating through the floorboards. He was on the phone again, but this time he wasn't whispering. He was pleading. "Listen to me, Vinny," Gerald said. His voice was high and tight. "I told you the asset is secured. It is 50 acres of prime Virginia soil. Flat, green, perfect for the back nine. We are talking about a championship golf course. The zoning is agricultural right now, but I have a guy on the county board. We can flip it to commercial in 3 months. I paused with the squeegee in midair. A golf course. He wanted to pave over the apple orchard. He wanted to bulldoze the farmhouse I had restored with my own hands. "I know what I owe," Gerald said. He stopped pacing. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. 2 million. Yes. I know the interest is compounding daily, but this sale will net 5 million easy. I pay you off, I have 3 left over. Everyone wins. Just give me 48 hours. He listened for a moment. His face went pale. "No. Do not come to the house. Please. My son is here. The owner is here. She is difficult. If you show up, she might spook. I need her signature. Without the power of attorney, I cannot sell the land. I need to declare her incompetent first or get her to sign the rights over to Brian. Brian will do whatever I say." He hung up the phone. He slumped into the leather chair. He looked like a man who had just looked into his own grave. I climbed down the ladder slowly. My hands were steady, but my blood was boiling. It wasn't just greed. It was survival. Gerald owed $2 million to a loan shark named Vinny. If he didn't sell my daughter's farm, he was a dead man walking. That made him desperate. And desperate men are dangerous. I needed to warn Sarah, but I couldn't just tell her. If I told her Gerald owed money to the mob, she would panic. She might call the police and Gerald might do something rash before the cops arrived. I needed to beat him at his own game. I went to the kitchen. I needed to prepare for dinner. Patricia had ordered me to serve. She said they were having a family meeting and she wanted the table set with the good china. The china I had bought Sarah for Christmas. I walked into the kitchen and Sarah was there. She was staring at a document on the counter. She looked like she was going to be sick. "What is it, honey?" I asked quietly. She held it up. It was a legal document. Durable power of attorney. "They want me to sign this tonight, Dad," she whispered. "They said if I don't sign it. They said Brian is going to leave me. They said I am ruining this family because I am too selfish to let them manage the finances. They said, I am sick, Dad. They said I can't be trusted with money anymore because I forget to pay bills." "Did you forget to pay bills?" I asked. "No," she cried. "I pay everything. But last week the electricity was cut off. Patricia told me I forgot. But I know I sent the check. I think she intercepted the mail, Dad." Of course she did. They were manufacturing a crisis to justify the takeover. I took the document from her hand. I read it quickly. It was draconian. It gave Brian and Gerald full control over her assets, her medical decisions, and her property rights. It essentially turned her into a child in the eyes of the law. If she signed this, they could sell the farm tomorrow, and she couldn't stop them. I looked at the document. Then I looked at the pile of junk mail on the counter. There was a credit card offer. It had a similar layout. Lots of fine print. A signature line at the bottom. I had an idea. It was risky. It was insane. But it was all I had. "Sarah," I said, "I need you to trust me. Tonight at dinner they are going to corner you. They are going to yell. They are going to threaten. Brian is going to break your heart." She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "I know," she said. "You are going to cry," I said. "You are going to act terrified. And then when they push you to the edge, you are going to sign." "What?" she gasped. "Dad, no. If I sign that, they win." I pulled a pen from my pocket. I grabbed the credit card offer. I folded it so only the signature line was visible. I placed it under the power of attorney. "You aren't going to sign their paper, Sarah," I said. "You are going to sign mine." Dinner was a funeral. The dining room was dim lit only by candles. Patricia sat at the head of the table like a queen. Gerald sat opposite her, sweating through his shirt. Courtney was texting under the table. Brian sat next to Sarah, staring at his plate. I stood in the corner wearing a white apron over my flannel shirt. I held a water pitcher. I was invisible. I was furniture. Patricia clinked her fork against her glass. The sound was sharp and violent. "All right," Patricia said. "Enough stalling. We have eaten. We have chatted. Now we need to handle business." She pulled the document from under her placemat. She slid it across the mahogany table toward Sarah. "Sign it, Sarah," Patricia said. Her voice was not sweet anymore. It was hard. "We are done playing games. You are obviously incapable of managing this estate. The incident with the electricity was the last straw. You are unstable. You are depressive. And quite frankly, you are a danger to yourself." Sarah looked at the paper. She looked at Brian. "Brian," she said, "please." Do I have to do this? Brian looked up. His eyes were hollow. He looked like a man whose soul had been removed. Just sign it, Sarah, he said. His voice was flat. Mom and Dad know best. They are financial experts. I can't handle the stress anymore. If you don't sign it, I don't think we can stay together. I need a partner who is mentally sound. Sarah let out a sob. It wasn't acting. It was the sound of her heart breaking. Her husband was calling her crazy to please his mother. Courtney laughed. Oh my God, stop with the drama. Just sign the paper so we can watch a movie. You are so exhausting. Gerald slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. Sign the damn paper, he roared. We are trying to save you. We are trying to save this family from ruin. Do you have any idea how much this farm costs to run? You are driving us into the ground. He was projecting. He was the one driving them into the ground. But Sarah didn't know that. She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking. I stepped forward. More water, sir? I asked Gerald. Not now, you idiot. Gerald snapped. He didn't even look at me. I moved to Sarah's side. I pretended to reach for her glass. I stumbled. It was a clumsy old man's stumble. I bumped the table. The water pitcher tipped. Ice water spilled onto the tablecloth right next to the document. Oh God, Patricia shrieked. You clumsy fool! You ruined the tablecloth! Get a towel! Gerald yelled. I grabbed a napkin. I started dabbing the water frantically. In the chaos, in the shouting, in the movement of hands and napkins, I made the switch. I slid the real power of attorney document off the table and into my apron pocket. In the same motion, I slid the folded credit card application onto the table. It was face down, folded so only the signature line and a block of dense legal text were visible. I am so sorry, I stammered. I am so sorry. Get away from the table. Gerald barked. I stepped back. The switch was done. But would they notice? Sarah looked down. She saw the paper. She saw the fold. She looked at me. I gave a microscopic nod. She understood. I will sign, Sarah said. Her voice was trembling. I will sign it, but then I want to go to my room. Fine, Patricia said. Just do it. Sarah pressed the pen to the paper. She signed her name on the line. Sarah Reed. Done, she whispered. Gerald snatched the paper from under her hand. He didn't even look at the text. He only looked at the signature. He saw the ink. He saw the name. His eyes lit up with a greed so pure it was disgusting. Finally. He exhaled. He folded the paper and shoved it into his jacket pocket. You made the right choice, Sarah, Brian said. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. I am going to bed, Sarah said. She stood up. She walked out of the room without looking back. I started clearing the plates. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I had the real document in my pocket. Gerald had a credit card application signed by my daughter. Patricia poured herself another glass of wine. Well, that calls for a toast, she said. To us, and to the future of the Kensington estate. To the golf course, Gerald muttered under his breath. He took a massive swig of his drink. They laughed. They clinked glasses. They thought they had won. They thought they owned the world. I walked into the kitchen with the stack of dirty plates. I set them down in the sink. I pulled the real power of attorney out of my pocket. I looked at it one last time. Then I struck a match from the stove. I held the corner of the paper to the flame. I watched it curl and blacken. I watched the legal authority they thought they had turn into ash in the sink. I washed the ash down the drain. They were celebrating a victory that didn't exist. Gerald would take that paper to the developers in the morning. He wouldn't look at it until he was in the meeting. And when he unfolded it, I smiled. A cold, hard smile. But the night wasn't over. I had one more thing to do. I needed to secure the evidence. I needed the final nail in the coffin. I waited until they moved into the living room for brandy. I crept down the hall to the library. Gerald had left his laptop open. He was careless because he thought he was untouchable. I slipped into the room. I tapped the spacebar. The screen lit up. His email was open. I saw the thread with the developer. I saw the thread with the loan shark. And I saw something else. A folder labeled medical. I opened it. Inside were scanned documents. Dr. Aris's reports, fake diagnoses, prescriptions for antipsychotic medication that Sarah didn't need, and emails between Patricia and the doctor discussing payment for his cooperation. They were paying a doctor to falsify medical records. That wasn't just unethical. That was a felony. I pulled a USB drive from my pocket. I copied the folder. I copied the emails. I copied everything. I heard footsteps in the hall. Heavy footsteps. Gerald was coming back. I yanked the drive out. I wiped the keyboard with my sleeve. I looked around. There was nowhere to hide. The room was a dead end. "Hey!" Gerald's voice came from the doorway. I turned around. Gerald was standing there. He was swaying slightly. His face was flushed with alcohol and victory. "What are you doing in here, Gardner?" he asked. His eyes narrowed. I held up a dust rag I had grabbed from my pocket. "Just cleaning, sir," I said. Patricia said she wanted the library dusted before morning. Gerald stared at me. He looked at the laptop. He looked at me again. For a second, I thought he knew. I thought the game was up. I tightened my grip on the USB drive in my pocket. "Get out." He grunted. "Do it tomorrow. I have business to attend to." "Yes, sir," I said. I walked past him. I could smell the fear sweating out of his pores beneath the expensive cologne. He was going to check his email. He was going to send the document to the developer. He was going to try to scan the paper he had in his pocket. I needed to get out of the house. Now. I walked to the kitchen door. I stepped out into the cool night air. I exhaled. I had the evidence. I had saved the farm for tonight. But tomorrow Gerald would realize he had been duped. And when he did, the violence would start. I walked back to the shed. I didn't sleep. I sat on the cot and waited for the sun. The storm was coming, and I was going to be the lightning. The sun rose over the Shenandoah Valley, but it brought no warmth. I sat on the edge of my cot, in the freezing shed, scrolling through the encrypted email O'Malley had sent to my burner phone. The screen was small, but the numbers were big enough to see from space. I finally had the full picture, and it was uglier than I imagined. Gerald Kensington was not just a man with a gambling problem. He was a man standing on a trapdoor with a noose around his neck. According to O'Malley's report, Gerald owed $2.3 million to the Golden Horseshoe Casino in Atlantic City. He had signed 3 promissory notes using non-existent collateral. The casino had already sold the debt to a collection agency in New Jersey that specialized in breaking kneecaps, not filing lawsuits. They had given him until the end of the month. That was 3 days away. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Patricia had $500,000 in credit card debt spread across 12 different cards. She was funding a lifestyle of champagne and designer clothes on borrowed time. They had drained their retirement accounts. They had drained Brian's savings. They had even taken out a predatory loan against their car title. They were hemorrhaging money, and the only tourniquet they had left was my daughter's farm. I looked at the PDF attached to the email. It was a foreclosure notice for their previous home. It was dated 4 months ago. They hadn't just moved in with Sarah because they missed her. They moved in because they were homeless. They were squatters in Gucci loafers. I put the phone away as the shed door creaked open. It was Sarah. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were puffy and red. She held a garment bag in her hands. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice was trembling. They want you to wear this." She held up the bag. I unzipped it. Inside was a cheap black vest, a white shirt with a frayed collar, and a black bow tie. It looked like a costume from a high school play. "Tonight," Sarah said, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "They are hosting a gala. They call it an investor appreciation dinner. They invited 10 of the biggest developers in the state. Gerald says he is going to auction the land rights tonight. He wants to create a bidding war, and he wants me to serve drinks," I guessed. Sarah nodded. She pulled another outfit from the bag. It was a maid's uniform. Black dress, white apron. It was humiliating. It was designed to strip away her dignity piece by piece. "Patricia said I have to serve the hors d'oeuvres." Sarah sobbed. She said if I want to eat, I have to work. She told Brian it would teach me humility. And Brian, he just nodded Dad. He just sat there and let her say it. I touched the cheap fabric of the vest. It felt rough against my calloused fingers. This was their power move. They wanted to show these investors that they owned everything. The land, the house, the people. They wanted to display their dominance by turning the owner of the farm and her father into the help. "Put it on Sarah," I said. She looked at me shocked. "Dad, no. We can't do this. It is too much." "Put it on." I repeated, my voice hard as granite. "Tonight is not about serving drinks. Tonight is about gathering witnesses. We are going to let them play their game. We are going to let them think they are kings and queens, and when they fall, the drop will be that much higher." I spent the next hour transforming myself. I shaved with cold water. I slicked back my hair. I put on the ridiculous outfit. The shirt was too tight across my chest. The vest smelled like mothballs. I looked in the cracked mirror hanging on the shed wall. I didn't see a waiter. I saw a predator in camouflage. I walked up to the main house. The transformation was complete. The Kensingtons had turned my farmhouse into a cheap imitation of a French chateau. They had rented tables and chairs. They had hired a string quartet. There were flowers everywhere, lilies and orchids that cost more than Sarah's grocery budget for a year. Patricia was barking orders at the catering staff they had hired for the kitchen. She was wearing a silver gown that sparkled under the chandelier. Gerald was in a tuxedo adjusting his cufflinks. He looked nervous. He kept checking his watch. He knew the clock was ticking on his kneecaps. "Jackson." Gerald barked when he saw me. "You are late. Grab a tray. The guests are arriving in 10 minutes. And try not to look so rural. Stand up straight. Don't speak unless spoken to. If anyone asks, you are the hired help. You have no relation to this family. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, sir," I said. I grabbed a silver tray. I loaded it with crystal flutes of champagne. The guests began to arrive. Luxury sedans and limousines pulled up the gravel driveway I had raked yesterday. Men in expensive suits and women in diamonds stepped out, looking at the farmhouse with calculating eyes. These were not neighbors. These were sharks, developers, investors. People who looked at a 50-acre farm and saw a strip mall or a golf course. I moved through the crowd offering drinks. I kept my head down. I listened. "Nice piece of land," one man said. "Flat. Good drainage. You could fit 18 holes here easy." "I hear the owner is desperate." Another whispered. "Kensington owes money all over town. We can lowball him. He will take whatever we offer." I clenched my jaw. They were dissecting my daughter's life like it was a carcass. Then I saw Sarah. She walked out of this kitchen carrying a tray of canapes. She looked beautiful even in the maid's uniform, but her eyes were dead. She moved robotically. Courtney was standing near the piano, laughing with a group of young men. When Sarah walked by, Courtney stuck out her foot. Sarah stumbled. The tray wobbled. She caught it at the last second, saving the food. "Watch it, clumsy," Courtney hissed loud enough for the group to hear. "Try not to ruin the party. The help is so hard to train these days." The young men laughed. One of them reached out and touched Sarah's arm. "Easy there, sweetheart," he said, leering. "Maybe later you can serve us something else." I took a step forward. My hand went to the wine bottle in my pocket. I was going to break it over his head. But then I saw him. Walking through the front door was a man I hadn't seen in 5 years. He was older now, his hair completely white, but he still walked with the swagger of a man who owned half the state. William Reynolds. Reynolds was the CEO of Titan Development. He was the biggest real estate mogul in Virginia. We had done business together back in Texas when he was expanding his empire. We had built a skyscraper together in Houston. He knew me. He knew my work. He knew exactly how much money I had in the bank. And Gerald Kensington was rushing toward him, hand extended, looking like a desperate puppy. "Mr. Reynolds," Gerald boomed. "So glad you could make it. Welcome to the Kensington estate." Reynolds shook his hand briefly. He looked around the room. He looked bored. "Nice place, Gerald," Reynolds said. "You said you had a prime opportunity. I am here. Impress me. I need to show you the blueprints," Gerald said, sweating. "The zoning is practically approved. We can break ground in spring. Let me get you a drink." Gerald snapped his fingers in my direction. "Waiter, champagne. Now." I walked over. My heart was pounding. This was the moment. The universe had handed me a loaded gun. I approached them. I lowered the tray. Gerald grabbed a glass without looking at me. Reynolds reached for one. Then he stopped. He looked at my hand. He looked at the scar on my thumb from a table saw accident in '98. He looked up at my face. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened. "Jack," Reynolds said. "Jack Reed. What the hell are you doing in a monkey suit?" Gerald froze. He looked at Reynolds. He looked at me. "You know the help?" Gerald asked, confused. Reynolds ignored him. He stared at me. "Jack," he repeated. "You retired 5 years ago. You sold the company for, what was it? 40 million. Why are you serving drinks to this clown?" Gerald dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor. Champagne soaked his tuxedo shoes. 40 million, Gerald whispered. I looked at Reynolds. I put a finger to my lips. "Shh," I whispered. "I am undercover Bill." Reynolds looked at Gerald. He looked at the fear in Gerald's eyes. He looked at the desperation. He was a smart man. He put the pieces together in a second. "Undercover," Reynolds said. A slow smile spread across his face. "I see." He turned to Gerald. His face went cold. "Gerald," Reynolds said, "I think there has been a misunderstanding. I was under the impression you owned this property." "I do," Gerald stammered. "I have the papers. I have the power of attorney. It is all legal." Reynolds looked at me. I gave a microscopic shake of my head. "I don't think so," Reynolds said. He took a step back. "I don't do business with middlemen, Gerald, and I certainly don't do business with men who make Jack Reed serve them champagne." He turned to the room. He raised his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reynolds announced. The room went silent. I would advise you all to keep your checkbooks in your pockets. I have it on good authority that the title to this land is distressed. A murmur went through the crowd. The sharks smelled blood, but this time it was Gerald's blood. Gerald turned purple. That is a lie. He screamed. He pointed at me. Who is this man? He is a nobody. He is a broke old gardener. He is lying to you. Reynolds laughed. Broke, he said. This man built the skyline of Houston. He could buy you and sell you for parts before breakfast, Gerald. I set the tray down on a side table. I took off the bow tie. I unbuttoned the vest. I think the party is over, Gerald, I said. My voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the room. Patricia came running over. She grabbed Gerald's arm. What is happening? She hissed. Why are they leaving? Because your husband is a fraud, Patricia, I said, and everyone here knows it. The guests started to file out. They didn't even say goodbye. They just put down their drinks and walked away. No one wanted to be associated with a fraud. No one wanted to be caught in the blast radius of a deal gone bad. In 5 minutes, the room was empty. Only the string quartet remained looking confused. Leave, I told them. They packed up and ran. Now it was just us. Me, Sarah, and the Kensingtons. Gerald was shaking. He looked at the empty room. He looked at the unsigned contracts on the table. He looked at his watch. You ruined it, he whispered. You ruined everything. Vinny is going to kill me. Good, I said. Gerald lunged at me. He was big and he was desperate. He swung a fist at my face. I didn't move. I caught his fist in my hand. My grip was iron. I worked with steel and stone my whole life. His hand was soft. It was the hand of a man who signed checks he couldn't cash. I twisted his wrist. He screamed and dropped to his knees. Don't you ever touch me again, I said, and don't you ever touch my daughter. I shoved him back. He fell onto the floor amidst the shattered glass and spilled champagne. Patricia screamed. She ran to him. Courtney stood by the piano, her mouth open, her phone in her hand, recording everything. You are crazy, Patricia yelled. We have the power of attorney. Sarah signed it. We still own the rights. We can still sell it to someone else. I laughed. Check your pocket, Gerald, I said. He fumbled in his jacket. He pulled out the folded paper. He smoothed it out. He looked at the signature. Sarah Reed. Then he looked at the text above it. It wasn't a power of attorney. It was a credit card application for a department store. What is this? He gasped. I switched them, I said. While you were busy yelling at my daughter, I switched the papers. You burned the real one in the sink, Gerald. You don't have power over anything. You don't even have power over your own bladder right now by the looks of it. He looked down. A dark stain was spreading on his tuxedo pants. You have nothing, I said. No deal, no money, no leverage. And that is when the front door opened. We all turned. Standing in the doorway was O'Malley. And he wasn't alone. Behind him were 2 men in dark suits. They weren't police. They looked like lawyers, but the kind of lawyers who carried guns. Mr. Reed, O'Malley said, stepping into the room. I brought the paperwork, and I brought some friends from the bank. He walked over to me. He handed me a thick folder. I opened it. Gerald Kensington. I read aloud. Patricia Kensington. It says here that your mortgage on the city house was foreclosed 3 months ago. It says here that your debt was sold to a private equity firm this morning. I looked at them. I own the firm, Gerald. I bought your debt, every cent of it. 2.3 million to the casino, 500,000 to the credit cards, and the 2 million you owe to Vinny. Gerald's eyes bulged. You bought Vinny's debt. I did, I said. Vinny was happy to sell for 50 cents on the dollar. He prefers cash over kneecaps. So now you don't owe him. You owe me. I dropped the folder on his chest. And I am collecting. Right now. Patricia began to sob. This cannot be real. This is a nightmare. It is real, Patricia, I said. And it gets worse. I turned to Sarah. She was standing by the kitchen door, still in her maid's uniform. She looked shocked. Sarah, I said, go upstairs, pack your things, pack everything that matters. She nodded slowly. Where are we going, Dad? She asked. We aren't going anywhere, I said. They are. I looked at Brian. He was cowering in the corner. Brian, I said, you have a choice and you can stay here with your parents and explain to the police why you were complicit in fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. Or you can leave, right now, and never come back. Brian looked at his parents. He looked at Sarah. He looked at me. He stood up. He didn't say a word. He walked to the door. Brian! Patricia shrieked. You coward! Help us! He opened the door and walked out into the night. He left his wife. He left his parents. He ran like the rat he was. I turned back to Gerald. You have 1 hour, I said. Take your clothes, take your car, and get off my land. If you are still here in 61 minutes, I call the sheriff, and I show him the USB drive I took from your computer last night. The one with the fake medical records. Gerald went white. He knew. He knew I had him. Get up, I roared. They scrambled. Gerald, Patricia, and Courtney ran up the stairs. I heard them throwing things into suitcases. I heard them screaming at each other. I poured myself a glass of champagne from a bottle that hadn't been opened. I took a sip. It tasted like victory. 1 hour later, they were gone. The house was quiet. The mess was still there, but the rot was gone. Sarah came down the stairs. She had changed into jeans and a sweater. She sat next to me on the sofa. Is it over, Dad? She asked. For now, I said. I put my arm around her. You bought their debt, she asked. Does that mean, do they owe us? They owe us everything, I said, and they are going to spend the rest of their lives paying for it. But not with money, Sarah. With their freedom. I picked up my phone. I dialed the sheriff. Sheriff, I said, I would like to report a case of fraud, and I have the evidence to prove it. The sun was coming up over Willow Creek. It was going to be a beautiful day. The silence that followed William Reynolds' departure was heavy enough to crush a man, but Gerald Kensington was not a man who accepted defeat. He was a cockroach who scurried for the cracks when the light turned on. The party was dead. The champagne was warm. The guests had fled like they smelled smoke. But Gerald was not packing his bags. He was on his phone pacing the library floor. His tuxedo shirt unbuttoned, his face slick with a cold, oily sweat. I stood in the hallway polishing a brass handle that was already clean, listening to the desperate gasps of a drowning man. He was calling the bottom feeders. He had lost the Titan, so now he was calling the vultures. Sterling. Gerald barked into the phone. Do not hang up. I have the property. 50 acres. Reynolds walked, but he is a fool. I want to close tonight. Yes, tonight. 5 million. Cash. No contingencies. No inspections. He listened. He nodded. He wiped his forehead with a trembling hand. I will email the contract now. You wire the deposit to the offshore account. I will have the signature in 10 minutes. Done. He hung up. He let out a laugh that sounded like a bark. He looked at Patricia, who was sitting on the sofa staring at a dead flower arrangement. "We are saved," Gerald rasped. "Sterling Ventures. They are sharks, Patricia. They buy distressed assets for pennies on the dollar. But they pay cash. 5 million. It is half of what Reynolds would have paid, but it is enough. It is enough to pay Vinny. It is enough to save our necks." He ran to the printer. The machine whirred to life, spitting out a thick document. The sale agreement. It was the death warrant for Willow Creek. "Get the girl," Gerald ordered. "Get her in here, now." Patricia stood up. Her eyes were hard. She marched to the kitchen, where Sarah was washing the crystal glasses, her hands red from the hot water. "Leave it," Patricia snapped. "Get in the library. Your father-in-law has saved us from your incompetence." I followed them. I stood by the door, my hands clasped behind my back, playing the invisible servant. But my eyes were recording every detail. Gerald slammed the fresh stack of papers onto the mahogany desk. He clicked a gold pen. He pointed to the line at the bottom of the last page. "Sign," Gerald said. Sarah looked at the paper. She looked at the number. $5 million. "You are selling my farm," she whispered. "It is not your farm," Gerald shouted. "It is our survival. Do you have any idea what happened tonight? Reynolds humiliated us. He walked away. But I fixed it. I always fix it. Sterling is wiring the money as soon as you sign." "I am not signing," Sarah said. Her voice was shaking, but her chin was up. "Dad gave this to me. It is for us. For our future." Gerald looked at Brian. Brian was standing by the window looking out at the darkness. He refused to look at his wife. "Brian," Gerald said, his voice low and dangerous. "Handle your wife. If she does not sign this document, Vinny is going to come here. And he is not going to knock. He is going to burn this house down with us inside. Do you want to die, Brian?" Brian turned around. His face was pale. He looked like a ghost. He walked over to Sarah. "Sarah," Brian said. "Sign the paper." "No," Sarah pleaded. "Brian, look at me. This is our home. We can start over. We can work. We can pay the debts slowly. We don't have to sell." "There is no slowly," Brian yelled. He slammed his hand on the desk. The sound made Sarah jump. "There is no time. Dad owes money to people who kill people, Sarah. They are going to break my legs. They are going to hurt you." He grabbed her shoulders. He shook her. "Sign the damn paper, Sarah, or I swear to God I am leaving." Sarah froze. "What? I am done," Brian said. His voice was cold. "Dead. I am done with the poverty. I am done with the struggle. I am done with you pretending to be some strong, independent woman. You are nothing without me. If you do not sign this right now, I am filing for divorce in the morning. I will take half of whatever is left, and I will leave you here to rot." Sarah looked at him. She looked at the man she had married, the man she had supported, the man she had loved through his failures, and she saw a stranger. "You would leave me," she whispered. "For money. I would leave you for survival." Brian spat. "Sign it, or get out. If you don't sign, you can pack your bags and sleep in the ditch, because this is my parents' house now." Patricia stepped forward. She put a hand on Sarah's arm. Her nails dug into the flesh. "He means it, dear," Patricia said. "And frankly, we are tired of carrying you. You are a burden, a heavy, useless burden. Sign the paper and maybe we will give you enough cash to rent a studio apartment in the city. Don't sign, and you are on the street tonight." The room felt small. The air was sucked out of it. It was a pressure cooker of greed and fear. They were three wolves cornering a lamb. Sarah looked down at the paper. She looked at the pen, her hand hovered over it. She was trembling. She was broken. Then she looked up. She looked past Brian. She looked past Gerald. She looked at me. I was standing in the shadows by the door. The old man. The gardener. The failure. Her eyes were pleading. Dad, help me. Tell me what to do. I looked at her. I looked at the contract. I knew something they didn't. I knew the law. I knew that a signature on a contract to sell property is only valid if the person signing actually holds the title to the property. Sarah didn't own Willow Creek. Not technically. When I bought the farm, I placed the deed in the Reed Family Trust. I was the sole trustee. Sarah was the beneficiary. She could live there. She could manage it. But she could not sell it. Only I could sell it. Her signature on that paper was worth less than the ink used to write it. It was a blank check drawn on an empty account. If she signed, Gerald would think he won. He would call Sterling. He would trigger the wire transfer. He would commit fraud on a massive scale. He would sell something he didn't own using a document that was invalid. It was the perfect trap. I looked at my daughter. I kept my face stone cold. I gave her a single, slow nod. Do it. Sarah saw the nod. She didn't understand why, but she trusted me. She took a deep breath. She picked up the gold pen. Fine, Sarah said. Her voice was dead. I will sign. But after this, Brian, we are done. Good riddance, Brian muttered. Just sign. Sarah pressed the pen to the paper. The scratch of the nib on the paper was loud in the silent room. She wrote her name. Sarah Reed. She dated it. She dropped the pen. Gerald snatched the document before the ink was dry. He held it up to the light like it was a holy relic. He scanned the signature. He scanned the date. Yes. He screamed. Yes. He kissed the paper. He literally kissed the paper. We did it. Gerald laughed. A manic, high-pitched sound. He grabbed Patricia and spun her around. $5 million. We are rich again, Patty. We are back. Patricia laughed. She clapped her hands. Oh, thank God. I can finally buy decent clothes again. Brian slumped into a chair. He put his head in his hands. He looked relieved, but he also looked sick. He knew what he had just done. He had sold his marriage for a wire transfer. Gerald ran to the computer. He scanned the document. He attached it to an email. He hit send. Sent. Gerald announced. The money will be in the offshore account by morning, Sterling promised. He turned to Sarah. He stopped laughing. His face went flat. Now, Gerald said. Get out. Sarah blinked. What? You heard me, Gerald said. He walked over to the liquor cabinet and poured himself a scotch. The deal is done. The farm is sold. The new owners take possession in 48 hours. We need to pack. And quite frankly, I don't want to look at your miserable face while I celebrate. But you said I could stay. Sarah stammered. You said I lied, Gerald said. He took a sip of scotch. He smiled. It is called negotiation, honey. You say what you need to say to close the deal. He pointed to the door. Get your things, get your old man, and get off my property. You have 1 hour. If you are not gone, I will have the sheriff remove you for trespassing. Brian, Sarah said. She looked at her husband. Brian didn't look up. He stared at the carpet. Go, Sarah, Brian whispered. Just go. Sarah looked at me. I stepped out of the shadows. "Come on, Miss Sarah," I said. My voice was raspy. "Let us go, we aren't wanted here." Sarah looked at me. She saw the calm in my eyes. She nodded. She turned and walked out of the library. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She walked with dignity. I followed her. As I closed the library door, I heard Gerald laughing again. "Idiots," he said. "They have no idea how the real world works." I paused. I put my hand on the brass knob. "You are right, Gerald," I whispered to the wood. "You have absolutely no idea." We walked to the kitchen. Sarah grabbed her purse. She grabbed her coat. "Dad," she said. Her voice was hollow. "What do we do now?" "We lost. I signed it. It is gone." I put my arm around her shoulders. I guided her out the back door into the cool night air. The stars were bright above the Shenandoah Valley. The crickets were singing. It was peaceful. It was the calm before the hurricane. "We didn't lose anything, honey," I said quietly. I led her toward the shed. "But I signed it," she said. "You signed a piece of paper, Sarah," I said. "That is all. You can't sell what you don't own." She stopped walking. She looked at me. "What do you mean, I mean?" I said, looking back at the house where the lights were blazing and the champagne was flowing. "I mean that tomorrow morning Gerald is going to wake up expecting $5 million. And instead, he is going to get a visit from the FBI. I opened the shed door. "Pack your bag, Sarah. We aren't sleeping here tonight. We are going to a hotel. A nice one. Because tomorrow is going to be a very busy day." She looked at me. She saw the fire in my eyes. She saw the father she remembered, the man who moved mountains and built skyscrapers. "Okay, Dad," she said. We walked into the darkness, leaving the Kensingtons to their party. They were dancing on a grave, but they didn't realize it was their own. The cork popped with a sound like a gunshot echoing through the high ceilings of the farmhouse. Patricia laughed, a high, shrill sound that grated against my nerves like sandpaper. She held the bottle of Dom Perignon, my bottle, the one I had saved for Sarah's first anniversary, and poured it freely into the crystal flutes. The foam spilled over the edges, dripping onto the hardwood floor, but she didn't care. Why would she care about the floor when she thought she had just sold the house for $5 million? To the Kensington revival. Gerald shouted, raising his glass. To liquidity. To being back on top. They clinked glasses. The sound was sharp and cheerful, a stark contrast to the devastation on my daughter's face. Sarah stood by the kitchen island, her hands gripping the edge so hard her knuckles were white. She looked like a ghost haunting her own home. Brian stood behind his parents, a glass of whiskey in his hand, looking everywhere but at his wife. Patricia took a long swallow of the champagne. She sighed with exaggerated pleasure. She turned her predatory gaze toward Sarah. "Oh, stop looking so tragic, Sarah," Patricia said. Her lips were stained with wine. "You should be thanking us. We just saved you from a life of mediocrity. Do you honestly think you could have run this place? Look at you. You can barely run a dishwasher without crying." Courtney laughed from the sofa, where she was already browsing luxury cars on her phone. "Right," Courtney said. "She would have turned this place into a cat sanctuary or something equally pathetic. Daddy did the hard work. He made the deal." Gerald puffed out his chest. He looked at me, standing in the shadows by the back door, still wearing my ridiculous waiter's outfit. "Hey, old man," Gerald barked. "Refill my glass. And try not to spill it this time. This is celebration vintage, not the swill you are used to." I walked over. I took the bottle. I poured. My hand was steady as a rock. I looked into Gerald's eyes. They were glassy and bloodshot, filled with the arrogance of a man who thinks he has cheated fate. He didn't see the wolf standing right in front of him. He only saw the sheep costume. "You know, Jackson," Gerald said, leaning back. "You should be grateful, too. With the commission I am taking for managing this sale, I might be generous. I might give you a few $100s for a bus ticket back to Texas, or wherever it is failures go to die." He laughed at his own joke. Patricia joined in. "Don't be too generous, Gerald," Patricia warned. "We have expenses. We have appearances to maintain. We need to get back to the country club. We need to show everyone that the Kensingtons never truly fall." She walked over to Sarah. She stood too close, invading her personal space. She reached out and touched a lock of Sarah's hair. It was a gesture that mimicked affection, but felt like a threat. "You know, dear," Patricia cooed, "this is really for the best. You were never cut out for this life. The stress, the pressure, it was breaking you. We did you a favor. Now you can go back to being simple. You can find a nice little rental, maybe get a job at a library. Something quiet, something that doesn't require ambition." Sarah pulled her head away. "This was my home," Sarah whispered. "It was an asset." Gerald corrected loudly. "And assets are meant to be liquidated. You were sitting on a gold mine and treating it like a petting zoo. That is the difference between us, Sarah. You see sentimental value. We see market value. That is why we win." They continued to drink. They continued to celebrate. They dissected their future purchases loud enough for us to hear. A new Porsche for Courtney. A penthouse in the city for Gerald and Patricia. A boat. They were spending my money before the wire transfer had even cleared. They were feasting on the carcass of my daughter's dream, and they wanted us to watch them chew. Outside, the wind picked up. A crack of thunder shook the house. The rain began to fall heavy and hard, drumming against the roof like 1,000 fingers tapping in judgment. Courtney stood up. She looked out the window. "Ew, it is pouring," she said. Then she turned to me. A cruel idea sparked in her eyes. "Hey, Gardner," she said. "I just remembered something. Daddy said you have to be off the property in an hour." "That is right," Gerald said, checking his watch. "You have 40 minutes left." "Well," Courtney smiled, "I thought I would help you pack." She ran to the back door. She threw it open. The wind and rain swirled into the kitchen. She ran out into the storm toward the shed. "Courtney, wait!" Sarah yelled. But she was gone. 5 minutes later, Courtney returned. She was soaked, but she was laughing. She wasn't carrying suitcases. She was empty-handed. "Where are my things?" I asked. Courtney shrugged. She grabbed a towel and started drying her hair. "Oops," she giggled. "I tried to carry your bag, but it was so heavy. I think I dropped it." "By the gate, in the mud." She looked at her mother for approval. "And your clothes," she continued. "They were so smelly. I thought they needed a wash, so I threw them in the ditch. The rain should clean them right up." "You threw his clothes in the ditch," Sarah screamed. "He is an old man. It is freezing outside. He is a squatter," Patricia snapped. "And squatters don't have rights." Courtney was just speeding up the eviction process. Patricia walked over to the kitchen island. She opened her purse. She pulled out a checkbook. "Speaking of eviction," she said, "we need to discuss the final terms of your departure." She wrote something on a check. She ripped it out. She slammed it onto the marble counter. $50,000, Patricia said. Sarah looked at the check. "What is this?" "It is your severance package," Patricia said coldly. From the family. My severance package. Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Yes, Patricia said. Listen to me carefully, Sarah. When the money comes in tomorrow, we are going to be in a different tax bracket, a different social bracket. And frankly, you do not fit there. She gestured to Brian, who was leaning against the refrigerator, staring at his shoes. Brian has a bright future. He is going to help Gerald manage the investments. He is going to be a wealthy man. And wealthy men need wives who can handle the lifestyle. Wives who don't cry over spilled wine. Wives who don't bring their homeless fathers to live in the garden shed. Sarah looked at Brian. Brian, look at me. Brian did not look up. We think it is best if you file for divorce, Patricia said. Uncontested. You take this 50,000. You sign the papers. You walk away. It is more money than you have ever seen in your life. It is a generous offer. Generous, Sarah choked out. You sell my farm for $5 million and you offer me 50,000 to leave my husband. Brian, Sarah said again. Her voice was pleading. Say something. Tell them they are crazy. Tell them you love me. Brian finally looked up. His face was pale. His eyes were dead. Take the money, Sarah, he whispered. What? Sarah stepped back as if he had hit her. Take the money, Brian said louder. Mom is right. It isn't working. We are from different worlds. I need to focus on the business. I need to get out of debt. And you are just... He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The betrayal was complete. He was choosing the fantasy of wealth over the reality of his marriage. He was selling his wife for a seat at the table of a feast that didn't exist. Patricia smiled. A triumphant, predatory smile. See? Patricia said. Even he knows it. You are dead weight, Sarah. You are an anchor, and we are cutting the chain. She pushed the check toward Sarah. Take it. Pack your things, and get out. Take your father with you. Go find a shelter. Go find a trailer park. Go anywhere but here. Sarah looked at the check. She looked at Brian. She looked at the Kensingtons gloating in their victory. She didn't take the check. She spat on it. I don't want your money, Sarah said. Her voice was low and fierce. And I don't want your son. You can keep him. He deserves you. Patricia's face twisted in rage. You ungrateful little brat, Patricia screeched. Get out! Get out of my house right now before I have Gerald throw you out. I stood up from the stool in the corner. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. The sound cut through the room. They all turned to look at me. I rolled my shoulders. I cracked my neck. I stood up to my full height. I am 6'2". I have lifted steel beams and poured concrete my entire life. I am not a small man. And for the last 3 days, I had been hunching over, making myself look smaller, making myself look weak. I stopped hunching. I unbuttoned the tight waiter's vest. I took it off and dropped it on the floor. I rolled up the sleeves of my flannel shirt, revealing the thick, scarred muscles of my forearms. I walked toward them. I didn't walk like a gardener. I walked like the man who built the infrastructure of a state. Gerald took a step back. He looked confused. What are you doing, Jackson? Gerald stammered. Get your bag and leave. I stopped in front of him. I looked down at him. The fear in his eyes flickered. He sensed the change. He sensed the danger. I am leaving Gerald, I said. My voice was different. It wasn't the raspy, humble voice of the beggar. It was deep. It was resonant. It was the voice I used to command job sites with 300 men. But before I go, I have something to say. I looked at Courtney. She was still holding her phone, but she wasn't recording anymore. She looked scared. "You threw my clothes in the mud," I said. "You laughed. You thought it was funny to kick a man when he was down. Remember that feeling, Courtney. Remember how it felt to be powerful. Because you are going to need that memory to keep you warm where you are going." I turned to Brian. He was trembling. "And you," I said. "I trusted you with my daughter. I gave you the benefit of the doubt. I thought you were just weak." "But you aren't weak, Brian. You are rotten. You sold the best thing that ever happened to you for a promise of fool's gold." Finally, I looked at Patricia. She was clutching her wine glass like a weapon. "And you, Patricia," I said softly. "You offered my daughter $50,000. You called her dead weight. You thought you could buy her dignity with a fraction of what you stole." I leaned in close. I smelled the fear coming off her. "You like to talk about assets. You like to talk about market value. Well, let me tell you about the market value of what you just did. The price of greed is everything you have," I whispered. I walked over to Sarah. She was looking at me with wide eyes. She saw it too. The mask was gone. Her father was back. "Let us go, Sarah," I said. I opened the back door. The storm was raging outside. The rain was coming down in sheets, but I didn't care. The air inside that house was more toxic than any storm. "Wait!" Gerald yelled. "Gerald!" He tried to muster some authority. "You can't just threaten us. Who do you think you are?" I paused in the doorway. The lightning flashed, illuminating my silhouette. "I am not the gardener, Gerald," I said. "I am the storm." I stepped out into the rain. Sarah followed me. We walked into the darkness, leaving the light of the house behind. The mud sucked at our boots. The rain soaked us to the bone. But for the first time in days, I felt clean. We walked to the gate. My truck was there waiting. I opened the door for Sarah. "Where are we going?" she asked, shivering. "To the Hilton," I said, starting the engine. "I have a suite, a hot shower, and a lawyer waiting for us at 8 a.m. I drove down the gravel road. I looked in the rearview mirror. The lights of the farmhouse were glowing in the distance. They were celebrating. They were drinking. They were dreaming of millions. "Enjoy the night, Gerald," I said to the rearview mirror. "Because the sun is coming up, and when it does, you are going to burn." The sun rose over the Shenandoah Valley, burning off the mist that clung to the apple orchards. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. Inside the farmhouse, Gerald Kensington was pacing the kitchen floor wearing his rumpled tuxedo from the night before. He hadn't slept. He had spent the last 6 hours refreshing his banking app, waiting for the wire transfer notification that would save his life. Patricia sat at the island, nursing a black coffee and a migraine. Courtney was asleep on the sofa, still wearing her party dress. They looked like the survivors of a shipwreck, but in Gerald's mind, they were about to be rescued by a golden helicopter. "Where is the money?" Gerald muttered. He tapped the screen aggressively. Sterling said, "Morning." "It is morning. Why is the balance still 0? "Maybe there is a delay," Patricia said, rubbing her temples. "It is a large sum, Gerald. $5 million takes time to clear." "I don't have time," Gerald snapped. "Vinny's deadline is noon. If that money isn't in the offshore account by 11:59, I am a dead man." His phone pinged. He jumped. He looked at the screen. It wasn't the bank. It was Sterling. "On my way to the property with the notary. Need the original signed document. Cashier's check in hand." Gerald let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. "He is coming here." Gerald said, a manic grin spreading across his face. "He is bringing a check. A cashier's check, Patricia. That is as good as gold." He grabbed the signed contract from the counter, where he had guarded it all night. He smoothed out the creases. "Wake Courtney up," he ordered. "We need to look presentable. We are handing over the keys in an hour." 30 minutes later, the Kensington family piled into the red convertible. It was a tight squeeze, but they didn't care. They were driving to the main gate to meet salvation. Gerald drove fast, his tires kicking up gravel. He was humming. He was already spending the money in his head. He was safe. He was rich. He was a genius. They rounded the final bend in the driveway, the massive iron gate coming into view. Gerald slammed on the brakes. The convertible skidded sideways, coming to a halt in a cloud of dust. The gate was blocked. 3 black SUVs were parked horizontally across the entrance. They were massive, ominous vehicles with tinted windows and government plates. They looked like a wall of steel. "What is this?" Gerald yelled. He honked the horn. "Move! Get out of the way!" The doors of the SUVs opened in unison. 6 men stepped out. They were not developers. They were not investors. They wore dark suits, earpieces, and badges on their belts. They stood with their hands clasped in front of them, forming a human barricade. Gerald's face went pale. "Is it Vinny?" Patricia whispered, clutching his arm. "Did he send hitmen?" Gerald didn't answer. He opened the car door and stepped out. He tried to look authoritative, but his knees were knocking together. "This is private property," he shouted. "You are blocking my exit. I have a business meeting. Move immediately, or I will call the police." One of the men stepped forward. He was tall, with a shaved head and a face carved from granite. "We are the police, Mr. Kensington," he said, calm and cold. "Economic Crimes Unit, and we advise you to step away from the vehicle." "Police?" Gerald stammered. "What is this about?" A second man stepped out from the middle SUV. He was older, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that cost more than Gerald's car. He carried a leather briefcase. It was O'Malley. "Mr. Kensington," O'Malley said, walking toward him. "I believe we have some business to discuss regarding the sale of this property." Gerald looked at O'Malley. He didn't recognize him. He just saw a lawyer. "Who are you?" Gerald asked. "Do you work for Sterling? Do you have the check?" O'Malley smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just found a seal in open water. "I am Sean O'Malley. I am the legal counsel for the Reed Family Trust. And no, I do not have a check. I have a warrant." "A warrant?" Gerald blinked. "For what?" "For fraud," O'Malley said. "For attempted grand larceny, for forgery, and for selling assets that do not belong to you." Gerald laughed. It was a nervous, hysterical sound. "You are mistaken," he said, pulling the contract from his pocket. "I have the papers right here. The owner signed them. Sarah Reed signed them last night. I have her signature. It is legal. I have power of attorney." O'Malley shook his head slowly. "Let me explain something to you, Gerald. Something you would have known if you were actually the financial wizard you claim to be. You cannot sell what you do not own." He opened his briefcase. He pulled out a document stamped with a gold seal. "This is the deed to Willow Creek Farm," O'Malley said, holding it up. "As you can see, the property is not owned by Sarah Reed. It is owned by the Reed Legacy Trust. Sarah is merely a beneficiary with residency rights. She has no authority to sell. Her signature on that contract is legally worthless. It is doodles on a napkin." Gerald stared at the deed. His mouth opened and closed. "But," she signed. He whispered. "She said she owned it. She lives here." O'Malley corrected. "She doesn't own it. The trust owns it. And the trust has a sole trustee who has the only valid signature authority. Who? Gerald screamed. Who is the trustee? I will get him to sign. I will cut him in on the deal. I need this sale. The trustee is the man you forced to sleep in a shed, O'Malley said. Gerald froze. Patricia let out a gasp. Courtney lowered her sunglasses, looking confused. The gardener? Gerald asked. The old man. The rear door of the middle SUV opened. A polished black boot stepped onto the gravel. Then a leg clad in fine Italian wool. I stepped out. I was not wearing the flannel shirt. I was not wearing the waiter's vest. I was wearing a navy bespoke suit, tailored to fit my frame perfectly. I wore a white shirt with a stiff collar and a silk tie. My hair was combed back. I was freshly shaved. On my wrist sat a vintage Rolex worth $30,000. I stood up to my full height. I buttoned my jacket. I adjusted my cuffs. I walked toward them. The gravel crunched under my dress shoes. It was the only sound in the world. Gerald looked at me. He looked at the suit. He looked at the watch. He looked at my face. He tried to reconcile the image of the broken old man he had bullied with the Titan standing before him. His brain couldn't process it. Jackson, he whispered. Mr. Reed. I corrected. My voice was deep and resonant. I stopped 3 feet from him. I looked him in the eye. Yesterday he had looked at me with disgust. Today he looked at me with terror. You were looking for the trustee Gerald, I said. You found him. You. Gerald stammered. But you said you were broke. You said you lost the business. You were shoveling manure. I lied. I said simply. Just like you lied when you said you loved my daughter. Just like you lied when you said you were helping her. The difference is my lie was a test. Your lie was a crime. Patricia scrambled out of the car. She ran to me. She tried to grab my arm, but one of the agents stepped in front of her, blocking her path. Jack, she cried. Jack, please. We didn't know. If we had known you had money, we would have treated you differently. I laughed. It was a dark sound. That is exactly the point, Patricia, I said. I didn't want to be treated well because I was rich. I wanted to be treated well because I was a human being, because I was family. But you failed that test. You failed it spectacularly. I turned back to Gerald. You tried to sell my land, I said, pointing to the farmhouse. You tried to sell 50 acres that I bought with my own sweat and blood. You forged medical documents to declare my daughter incompetent. You stole her money. You abused her hospitality. And you did it all while I watched. I leaned in close. Did you really think a man builds a construction empire by being stupid, Gerald? Did you really think I wouldn't check the paperwork? Did you really think I wouldn't protect what is mine? Gerald fell to his knees. He didn't choose to kneel, his legs just gave out. He knelt in the gravel in his ruined tuxedo. Please, he sobbed. Vinny, he is going to kill me. If I don't pay him today, I am dead. You have money, Jack. You have millions. Help me. We are family. I will do anything. I will be your servant. I will clean the stables. Just help me. I looked down at him. I looked at the man who had called me a loser. The man who had thrown a dollar bill at me. I already helped you, Gerald, I said. He looked up, hope flickering in his wet eyes. You did. I nodded. I looked at O'Malley. Show him. O'Malley pulled another document from his briefcase. He handed it to Gerald. This is a transfer of debt assignment, O'Malley said. As of 8 a.m. this morning, Jackson Reed purchased your entire debt portfolio. The casino debt, the credit card debt, and the private loan held by Vincent Moretti. Gerald stared at the paper. His hands shook so hard the paper rattled. "You bought my debt," he whispered. "I did," I said. Vinny was happy to sell. He gets his principal back. He doesn't have to worry about disposing of a body. It was a good business decision for him. "So, I owe you?" Gerald asked. "Yes," I said. "You owe me $2.5 million, plus interest, plus penalties." Gerald let out a breath. He smiled weakly. He started to stand up. "Oh, thank God," he said. "Thank God. Jack, we can work this out. We can set up a payment plan. I can manage the farm for you. I can—" "Sit down," I barked. Gerald dropped back to his knees. "There is no payment plan, Gerald," I said. "There is no management deal. I am calling the loan, immediately." "Calling the loan," Gerald gasped. "But I don't have the money." "You know I don't have the money." "I know," I said. "That is why we are moving to asset seizure." I signaled to the agents. "Seize it all," I said. The agents moved. They walked to the red convertible. "Get out of the car," one agent said to Courtney. Courtney shrieked, "This is my car! You can't take it!" The car was purchased with funds from a secured loan that is now in default. The agent said, "Get out, or we will remove you." Courtney scrambled out. She stood on the gravel in her party dress, looking lost. Patricia screamed as an agent took her purse. "My credit cards, my jewelry, purchased with stolen funds," the agent said. "Evidence," I looked at Gerald. "I am taking everything, Gerald. The car, the clothes on your back if they have any resale value. But mostly, I am taking your freedom." I nodded to the officer in charge. "Arrest him." The officer stepped forward. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. They glinted in the morning sun. "Gerald Kensington, you are under arrest for wire fraud, forgery, identity theft, and grand larceny." They pulled Gerald's arms behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Patricia screamed. She tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. An officer caught her arm. "Patricia Kensington, you are also under arrest for conspiracy and credit card fraud." They cuffed her too. Courtney started to cry. "Daddy, do something." Gerald looked at me. His eyes were dead. "Why?" he whispered. "Why did you let it go this far? Why didn't you just tell us?" "Because you needed to learn, Gerald," I said, adjusting my silk tie. "You needed to learn that you can't build a life on the backs of other people. You needed to learn that the gardener sees everything." I turned my back on them. I walked toward the black SUV where Sarah was waiting. I opened the door. She stepped out. She looked beautiful. She looked free. She looked at her in-laws being loaded into the back of a police van. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just watched. "It is done," she said softly. "It is done," I said. I put my arm around her. We watched as the convoy turned around. The dust settled. The silence returned to Willow Creek. The birds started singing again. The farm was safe. My daughter was safe. And the rats were in a cage. Now I said, "Let us go see about turning this place into a real home again." But the story wasn't quite over. There was still one loose end. Brian. He had run away, but he couldn't run forever. And I had a special surprise waiting for him too. The gravel driveway of Willow Creek was no longer a quiet country lane. It was a crime scene, and an auction block rolled into one. I stood over Gerald Kensington, watching the realization sink into his eyes like a stone in deep water. He looked at the document O'Malley had handed him. He looked at the agent as seizing his family's possessions. He looked at me. For the first time in his life, Gerald was seeing the true face of power. It was not shouting. It was not bullying. It was the absolute ability to take everything a man has without lifting a finger. "I bought your life, Gerald," I said, my voice cutting through the morning air like a cold wind. "O'Malley here negotiated the terms with your creditors at 3 o'clock this morning. We didn't just buy the casino debt. We bought the mortgage on your foreclosed house in the city. We bought the title loan on that red convertible over there. And yes, we bought the private loan you took from Vinnie Moretti." Gerald started to shake. "You can't do that," he whispered. "Vinnie wouldn't sell." "Vinnie is a businessman," I corrected him. "He knows that dead men do not pay interest. When my lawyer offered him a lump sum cash payment for your debt, he took it in a heartbeat. He signed over the promissory note. That means I am the holder of the note. I am the bank. And unlike Vinnie, I do not break legs. I foreclose." I turned to the lead agent from the asset recovery team. "Execute the writ of attachment I ordered. Seize everything." The agents moved with terrifying efficiency. They did not ask nicely. They did not wait for permission. This was a legal raid authorized by a judge who had seen the evidence of massive fraud. One agent walked up to Patricia. She was still clutching her handbag to her chest like a shield. "Ma'am, the bag," the agent said, holding out his hand. "No," Patricia screamed. "This is a Birkin. It is worth $20,000. You can't have it. It was purchased with a credit card that has been in default for 6 months," the agent said calmly. "It is collateral. Hand it over." He pulled the bag from her grip. Patricia wailed as if he had torn off her arm. He opened it and dumped the contents into a plastic evidence bag. He took out a wallet, a phone, and a velvet jewelry pouch. "My diamonds," Patricia sobbed. "My mother gave me those." "Actually," I said, stepping closer, "you bought those diamonds 3 months ago with the money you stole from Sarah's savings account. We have the receipts, Patricia. We tracked the serial numbers. Those aren't heirlooms. They are evidence of theft." The agent took the diamond earrings from her ears. He took the tennis bracelet from her wrist. He took the massive solitaire ring from her finger. With every item removed, Patricia seemed to shrink. Without her expensive armor, she was just a scared old woman who had played a game she didn't understand. Gerald tried to stand up. His face was purple. "This is illegal," he shouted. "You are stealing my property. I will sue you. I will sue you for everything you have." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "With what money, Gerald?" I asked. "You do not have a lawyer. You do not have a bank account. As of this moment, every asset you thought you owned has been frozen or seized to pay the judgment against you. You are destitute." I pointed to the red convertible. "That car belongs to the trust now." I pointed to the tuxedo he was wearing. "Honestly, I would take the suit off your back, but I don't want it. It smells like desperation." The humiliation was total. I wanted them to feel exactly what they had made Sarah feel. I wanted them to know what it was like to be stripped bare, to have no control, to be at the mercy of someone who held all the cards. Then the police moved in. It was time for the final act of this tragedy. The officer in charge stepped up to Gerald. He spun him around roughly. Gerald grunted as his face was pressed against the hood of the police cruiser. "Gerald Kensington, you are under arrest," the officer recited. "The charges are numerous, but let us start with wire fraud, bank fraud, and identity theft." The handcuffs clicked. It was a sharp metallic sound that echoed off the barn walls. Gerald began to cry. It was not a dignified cry. It was the blubbering of a child who got caught with his hand in the jar. "Patricia, help me," he sobbed. "Do something. Call someone." Patricia could not help him. She was being handcuffed by a female officer. Her hands were behind her back, her face pressed into the gravel. She was screaming about her rights, about her status, about how this was all a mistake. But no one was listening. Courtney was standing by the red convertible watching her parents be dismantled. She looked like a deer in headlights. She thought because she was young, because she was just the daughter, that she was immune. She was wrong. "You there," the officer said, pointing at Courtney. "Step away from the vehicle." Courtney held up her hands. "I didn't do anything," she said, her voice high and shrill. "I just live here. I don't know anything about fraud." "Really?" I said, walking toward her. I pulled a piece of paper from O'Malley's briefcase. "This is a credit card application in Sarah's name," I said, showing her the document. "It was filled out online. The IP address traces back to your phone, Courtney. You used your sister-in-law's identity to buy $5,000 worth of clothes online. That is federal identity theft." Courtney's mouth dropped open. I just borrowed it," she stammered. "I was going to pay it back. With what I asked. With the money you made from mocking my daughter. With the money you made from throwing my clothes in the mud." "Officer, arrest her," I said. Courtney screamed as the cuffs went on. It was a piercing sound, a sound of pure entitlement shattering against reality. "Wait," she yelled, kicking at the officer. "My phone, my car. I need my things." The officer ignored her. He took the phone from her hand. He took the keys to the convertible. "Asset seizure," he said. They dragged her toward the police van. She was thrashing and crying, her mascara running down her face. She looked at me with pure hatred. "I hate you," she screamed. "You ruined my life. You are a monster." I looked at her calmly. "I didn't ruin your life, Courtney," I said. "I just stopped you from ruining anyone else's." They loaded them into the van. Gerald, Patricia, Courtney. 3 people who thought they were royalty, now sitting in a cage on their way to a booking cell. The door slammed shut. The silence that followed was heavy. But we weren't done. There was one rat left to catch. I looked down the long driveway. A figure was walking toward us. He was walking slowly, his head down his shoulders, slumped. It was Brian. He had tried to run. He had walked maybe a mile down the road before he realized he had nowhere to go. No car, no money, no friends. The police perimeter had turned him back. He was returning to the only place he knew. He walked up to the group. He saw the police vans. He saw O'Malley packing up the documents. He saw me standing in my suit, my Rolex glinting in the sun. And he saw Sarah. Sarah was standing by the porch. She was watching him. Her face was unreadable. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked like a statue carved from ice. Brian stopped 10 feet away. He looked at me, then he looked at Sarah. He fell to his knees. He literally dropped into the dirt, his expensive slacks staining with mud. "Sarah," he croaked. His voice was broken. "Sarah, please." I was scared. They made me do it. They threatened me. He crawled forward a few inches. It was pathetic. It was the most disgusting thing I had ever seen. A man begging for forgiveness for a sin he had committed willingly. "I didn't want to hurt you, Sarah," Brian pleaded. "I love you. You know I love you. I needed to save my parents. I thought if we sold the farm we could start over. Just you and me. With the money we could be happy." Sarah walked down the porch steps. She moved slowly, deliberately. She stopped in front of him. She looked down at the man she had promised to love and cherish. "You thought we could be happy?" she asked, her voice quiet and deadly. "With stolen money. You thought we could build a life on the grave of my father's gift." Brian reached for her hand. She stepped back. "I am sorry," he sobbed. "I am so sorry." Give me another chance. I will work. I will pay it back. I will do anything. Just don't let them take me. Don't let your dad destroy me." Sarah looked at me. I didn't say a word. This was her moment. This was her exorcism. She looked back at Brian. She reached for her left hand. She grabbed the simple gold band on her ring finger, the ring he had given her 5 years ago, the ring she had cherished. She pulled it off. It was a struggle. Her hands were swollen from the hard labor they had forced her to do, but she yanked it free. She held the ring up. The gold caught the sunlight. "You aren't a victim," Brian Sarah said. "You are an accomplice. You watched them humiliate me. You watched them treat my father like a dog, and you didn't say a word. You didn't stand up for me. You stood up for the money." She threw the ring. It hit him in the chest and bounced into the dirt. "We are done," she said. "I am filing for divorce today. And unlike you, I am not asking for a settlement. I am asking for a restraining order." Brian stared at the ring in the dirt. He looked up, his face streaked with tears and snot. "Sarah, please," he whispered. "I have nowhere to go." Sarah turned her back on him. "That sounds like a you problem," she said. She walked back up the stairs and into the house. She didn't look back. She closed the door firmly. I looked at Brian. I signaled to the remaining officer. "Get him off my property," I said. The officer grabbed Brian by the arm and hauled him up. "You heard the lady," the officer said. "Move." Brian stumbled away down the driveway, walking toward a future that held nothing but regret. I watched him go. I adjusted my cuffs. I took a deep breath of the clean country air. The farm was quiet. The parasites were gone. The infection had been cut out. It was a brutal morning. It was a violent morning, but it was necessary. Sometimes you have to burn the field to save the crop. I walked up the steps to the house. I had a daughter to comfort, and we had a farm to run. The wheels of justice turn slow, but when you grease them with a high-priced legal team and a mountain of irrefutable evidence, they move fast enough to make your head spin. The trial of Gerald and Patricia Kensington was less of a legal battle and more of a public autopsy. O'Malley was surgical. He laid out the timeline of fraud, the forged medical documents, the identity theft, and the predatory loans with a precision that left the defense attorney looking at his shoes. Gerald tried to plea bargain. He offered to testify against his loan shark, Vinny. He offered to turn over associates he had scammed in the past. But the district attorney wasn't interested. The case was high profile. The local news had picked up the story of the wealthy squatters who tormented a young woman and her father. The public wanted blood, and the judge was happy to give it to them. Gerald was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud and grand larceny. When the gavel came down, he didn't scream or cry. He just slumped in his chair, a man whose entire existence was built on air finally collapsing under the weight of gravity. He looked at me across the courtroom. I didn't look away. I wanted him to see the face of the man who ended his charade. Patricia got 8 years for conspiracy and credit card fraud. She screamed as they led her away. She screamed that she was a victim, that she was accustomed to a certain lifestyle that she couldn't survive in a cage. But the guards didn't care about her lifestyle. They only cared about the handcuffs on her wrists. Courtney avoided jail time by turning state's witness against her parents. She claimed she was coerced. She claimed she was a victim of their manipulation. The jury bought it barely. But her punishment was perhaps more fitting than a cell. With her parents' assets seized and her credit score destroyed, she was cast out into the real world with nothing. No car, no trust fund, no skills. I kept tabs on her. Last I heard, she was working the night shift at a diner 3 towns over. She lives in a subsidized housing complex near the interstate. It is noisy. It is small. And nobody there cares about her last name. Sometimes I think about the girl who threw my clothes in the mud because they smelled. Now she scrubs grease traps for minimum wage. Life has a way of balancing the books. As for Brian, he disappeared. He sent divorce papers through a lawyer 6 months later. He didn't ask for alimony. He didn't ask for the farm. He just wanted to be free. Sarah signed them without a single tear. She was done mourning a man who never really existed. With the rats exterminated, it was time to deal with the house. The Kensingtons had left a mess. Not just the physical trash, but the financial wreckage. The farm was technically safe because I held the debt, but it was bleeding money. The operational costs were high, and there was no income. Sarah sat me down at the kitchen table a week after the arrest. She looked better. She was eating again. But she looked scared. "Dad," she said, "I know you bought the debt. I know you saved the farm, but I can't pay you back. I have nothing." I looked at her. I could have written a check. I could have funded the farm for the next 20 years and never felt it. But I remembered what happened. I remembered how easily she had been manipulated because she felt dependent. I remembered how she scrubbed the floor because she thought she had no other choice. "I am not asking you for money, Sarah," I said. "I am asking you for sweat." I pulled out a business plan I had drawn up. "I am not going to give you an allowance," I said. "That is what Gerald would do. That is what creates victims. Instead, we are going to be partners. I am the silent investor. You are the CEO, but you are going to work for every dime." We started the next day. I fired the expensive landscaping crew the Kensingtons had hired to maintain appearances. I handed Sarah a pair of heavy-duty gloves and a pair of shears. "We are going to plant grapes," I said. "The soil analysis says this valley is perfect for Cabernet Franc. We aren't going to build a golf course. We are going to build a vineyard." The first year was brutal. We worked from sunrise to sunset. Sarah learned how to drive the tractor. She learned how to fix the irrigation lines when they burst in the winter. She learned how to negotiate with suppliers and how to tell a bad deal from a good one. There were days she wanted to quit. Days she sat in the mud, crying, because the frost had killed the seedlings, or the pump had broken again. I didn't comfort her with platitudes. I didn't offer to hire someone to fix it. "Get up, Sarah," I would say. "The vines don't care if you are tired. Fix the problem." And she did. She got up. She wiped her face, and she fixed it. I watched her transform. The timid girl who let her mother-in-law spill wine on her was gone. In her place was a woman who could stare down a contractor who was trying to overcharge her. A woman who walked with her head high. Her hands were rough now. Her skin was tanned from the sun. She didn't look like a porcelain doll anymore. She looked like iron. We renamed the farm again. We took down the Kensington estate sign. We burned it in a bonfire and roasted marshmallows over the flames. We called it Reed Valley Vineyards. It took 2 years to get the first harvest. 2 years of hard labor and lean living. Sarah lived on a budget. She drove the old truck. She didn't buy new clothes. She poured every cent back into the land. And when the first bottles were ready, she didn't just sell them. She marketed them. She used her graphic design skills to create a label that was elegant and strong. She went to distributors. She pitched her story. She didn't use my name. She used her own. I remember the day she handed me the first check. It wasn't a lot. It was a dividend payment from the first quarter profits. "Here, Dad," she said. "It is not much, but it is real." I took the check. It was worth more to me than the 40 million I sold my company for. "You did good, kid," I said. "I didn't do it alone," she said. "You showed me how. I showed you the door I corrected. You walked through it. 3 years have passed since the night of the party. The night the rain washed away the pretenders. It is a warm autumn evening in Virginia. The sun is setting behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I am sitting on the wrap-around porch of the farmhouse. The rocking chair creaks rhythmically. It is a good sound. The air smells of ripe grapes and damp earth. Sarah walks out onto the porch. She is 30 now. She looks radiant. She is wearing jeans and a work shirt, but she carries herself like a queen. She holds 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. Our wine. The Reed Valley Reserve. She pours a glass for me and one for herself. She sits in the chair next to me. We watch the fireflies start to dance over the rows of vines that stretch out toward the horizon. I got a letter today, Sarah says. From prison, Gerald, I ask. She nods. He wants to know if I can send him some money for the commissary. He says the food is terrible. I chuckle. It is a low rumble in my chest. What did you do with the letter? I sent it back, she says. I wrote return to sender, and I included a coupon for a free tasting at the winery. Valid only in person. We laugh. It is a free, easy sound. The laughter of people who have nothing to hide and nothing to fear. You know, Dad, she says, looking out at the land. I used to hate this place when they were here. I used to feel like it was a prison. Now it feels like armor. It is armor, honey, I say. Because you built it. Nobody can take it away from you because you know exactly what it costs to keep it. She takes a sip of wine. She closes her eyes, savoring the taste. It is good, she says. It is the best, I agree. I look at her. I see the strength in her jaw. I see the peace in her eyes. I saved my daughter, but not by giving her a farm. I saved her by letting her fight for it. I saved her by showing her that the only thing that separates a victim from a victor is the willingness to stand up and say enough. The Kensingtons are a distant memory now, a bad dream that taught us a valuable lesson. They taught us that family isn't blood. Family is the people who stand beside you in the mud when the storm comes. Family is the people who hand you a shovel instead of a bill. I take a drink of the wine. It is earthy and rich. It tastes like victory. I lean back in the chair. I am an old man now. My back hurts more than it used to. My hands are stiffer, but I have never felt stronger. Because I know that when I am gone, Sarah will be okay. She doesn't need me to protect her anymore. She can protect herself. I raise my glass to the setting sun. To the farm, I say. Sarah clinks her glass against mine. The crystal rings out a clear, pure note that echoes across the valley. To us, she says. And that is all that needs to be said. The sun dips below the mountains. The stars come out. And down in the valley, the grapes are growing, ripening on the vine, waiting to be turned into something sweet and strong. Just like us. The Kensingtons made the fatal mistake of confusing net worth with self-worth. They believed that power came from a title on a gate or a bottle of expensive wine. But real power is quiet. It is the calloused hand that rebuilds what was broken. It is the patience to wait for the right moment to strike. This farm taught us that you cannot grow anything in toxic soil. You have to weed out the parasites before you can plant the seeds of a future. Sarah and I learned that family isn't defined by blood or marriage licenses. It is defined by who picks up a shovel when the storm hits. If you believe that justice is best served cold, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of retribution. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to save a loved one from their own family?